Okay, so welcome. As people start to trickle in, we'll get started in a moment, and there'll be instructions for language interpretation, as well as if you need the live transcript, you can hit the live transcript button at the bottom of the page. But just a few more moments while people trickle in. Okay, I'm going to kick it over to Lars to explain how to access the language interpretation if you need it.
Hola, buenas tardes. Hi, good afternoon. Me llamo Lars y mi cointérprete de hoy es Yuli. Estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea entre el inglés y el español. My name is Lars. My co-interpreter today is Yuli. We will be providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. Este evento será presentado en inglés y en español. Si no entiende el inglés, por favor seleccione el canal para español. Si usa una computadora, haga clic en el globito con interpretación, o si usa la aplicación Zoom en su teléfono o tableta, haga clic en los 3 puntitos, luego en interpretación de idiomas, luego español y finalizado. No se puede acceder a interpretación a través de un Chromebook o Linux. Today's event will be in English and Spanish. If you do not understand Spanish, please make sure to select the channel for English. If you're using a computer, click on the globe icon that says interpretation. Or if you're using the Zoom app on your phone or tablet, click on the 3 dots, then language interpretation, then English, then done. Interpretation is not available on Chromebooks or Linux-based devices. Por favor, silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando. Pedimos a todas las presentadoras que hablen despacio, especialmente si están leyendo. Please mute your mic when you're not speaking. We ask all presenters to speak slowly, especially if you're reading. Gracias por ayudarnos a crear este espacio multilingüe. Thanks for helping us create this multilingual space. Back to you.
Thanks, Lars. And so now we're going to get started with Alexa, and I think she might have different slides, Sarah. I don't know if she wants to share her screen.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to present Unpacking the Leandro Plan. I am Alexa Roberts. I am with the New Rural Project, and we are committed to amplifying the voices of our rural communities in our 7 focus counties. So tonight, we have partnered with the Communities for the Education of Every Child NC and Pastors for North Carolina Children. We are grateful for their expertise and being able to share some of this very important information that directly relates back to how we need to be more civically and electorally engaged in our communities so that we can help make sure that we elect people into office that are going to serve our communities well. So thank you very much for being with us. Real quickly, I just want to tell you a little bit about New Rural Project. New Rural Project was co-founded by our Cynthia Wallace and Helen Probst Mills. They both ran for office, and unfortunately, they noticed that there were large numbers of registered voters in our rural communities that simply did not vote. One of the pieces that we were most struck by was that in a race where there were 5.5 million votes counted, a race was decided by 401 votes. So if we can energize more people to get out there and have their voices heard, we can prove that your vote will count. So we feel that it's important that everybody understands why it's so important for them to get out and vote, and seeing the impact that this can have on our schools and our communities is one of the greatest ways I think that this can really relay to everyone how important it is to go out and vote. So we envision a future where all rural citizens can use their civic power and engagement to foster and sustain vibrant communities. We are nonpartisan 501c4. So we just work to eliminate barriers to engagement. We go around, we knock on people's doors, we make phone calls, we do what we can to listen to the folks that live in our focus counties and find out what is important to you. So thank you all for joining us here tonight. I wanted to share a little bit of information about what's currently happening in the schools in our 7 focus counties that New Rural Project focuses on, and that's in the South Central region of North Carolina. We have Anson, Hoke, Moore, Richmond, Robeson, Scotland, and Union. You can see the demographics here are quite different. We run the gamut from less than 3,000 students in a school district to just over 40,000 in the school district. And what you'll notice is that the Leandro Plan impacts state funding. And you can see here that those numbers can vary quite significantly. And that what that does is it leaves it up to individual counties to pick up the slack that our states aren't funding. And this goes back a lot to our tier system, which I might touch on just for a moment. But you can see that the funding in the per pupil expenditure, the funding that is provided to each school district, that is broken down by how much is spent on each student, also varies greatly. And so we have some counties that are getting over close to $13,000, others that are under 10,000, and that does not make for very equitable education across the board. So we have a tier system in North Carolina where the more well off your county is considered, the higher your tier number. So New Rural Project has mostly tier 1 counties with a couple of tier 3s. But you can see that by the percentage of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, and I'm using 2019, 2020 data for this, simply because after the pandemic hit, every child was provided the opportunity to receive a free school lunch and breakfast. But even in our counties that are considered well off, we have just under 40% of our students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. So that doesn't really necessarily mean they're very well off to begin with, when these annual average wages are pretty low as well. In order to qualify for a free and reduced lunch, you have to be considered at 130% below the poverty line. So we also have a lot of students who can't afford their lunches, but they still aren't going to qualify. So we have a lot of students going hungry every day. Just a quick overview of our demographics. Male, female split pretty well down the middle for all of our counties. You can see in a lot of the counties that we work in, they're majority minority. So these are the students that we already talked about. They're in tier 1 communities, so they're economically disadvantaged. They are also just not getting the same quality of services than some of our wealthier counties. So wanted to just share a little bit about that. By the numbers, you can see a lot of like in Robeson County, and I apologize for the titles on these, the race ethnicity here. I'm using what the State Department of Public Instruction uses, and they lump Indian as all Native American or however you decide to identify. So we have Asian, Pacific Islanders, Hispanics, Black and white, and you can see it's a very diverse community that the New Rural Project serves. So we anticipate seeing a lot of relief in our communities if the Leandro Plan would get funded. So I will stop sharing my screen at this point and turn this over to Sarah, because I believe she will be able to provide you with a lot more information about the Leandro Plan and where we go from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be here joining this important conversation. I'm Sarah Montgomery, and I'm here representing my work home at the North Carolina Justice Center's Education and Law Project, and my movement home with the Communities for the Education of Every Child, North Carolina. So our coalition has been around for a couple of years. We are leading the movement statewide for equitable school funding. And we use the Leandro case as a way to organize and mobilize our community members. So the goal for tonight is to make sure that everybody feels really comfortable and confident talking about what Leandro is all about, what this case signifies, and feels encouraged to connect with all of these great local leaders and to connect with our network of advocates at Every Child NC, and to push throughout this year and in the coming years to ensure that every child is afforded a constitutional education. So I wanted to start by positioning us a little bit tonight with understanding the coalition that has been formed in the last couple of years. So Communities for the Education of Every Child. We have a core leadership team comprised of the organizations you see here. We have over 40 organizational partners, and we have countless individuals, parents, faith leaders, advocates, community members, educators, administrators that have taken a stand because this issue is of absolute importance, and we believe in the power of collective advocacy. So I think Alexa did a phenomenal job, kind of demonstrating through the statistics that relief is needed. And I think the good news coming with the Leandro case is that if Leandro is realized, if we fully fund the plan that we're going to talk about called the Leandro Plan in just a moment, that relief will be coming, and it will be coming to benefit every child in our state, but there will be a really transformational impact on our state's most vulnerable student groups. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But just to understand where we are right now, we are in crisis mode. Public schools have been in crisis long before COVID-19 introduced a whole new host of challenges and barriers to academic achievement. Funding has been on the decline very sharply in the past decade. We've fallen to the lower states in the nation for per pupil expenditures for funding effort, which means the amount that we could be investing in education based on our growing economy. And we've seen leaders at the General Assembly really prioritize funneling public dollars away from the public education system and into private schemes that have been proven to not have the outcomes or not be able to ensure access and equitable education opportunities to every child. And the vast majority of our children in North Carolina are in traditional public schools, right? So advocates at Every Child NC feel like that needs to be first and foremost our main concern. And we do that through funding Leandro. And I mentioned that all of these regressive policies and this disinvestment in school communities and in children is harming vulnerable student groups, students that already face a number of barriers to education. And we're talking about students that have been affected by racial discrimination, our Black and Brown and other students of color. We're talking about students with disabilities, our English learners. We're talking about children trying to access opportunities for early education and not having enough availability in their local district. And we're also talking about students from rural counties. And so with the group of leaders here and the community that we're partnering with right now, we really have to understand that Leandro will be transformational, particularly for our rural districts that have been so neglected. There's something that we should feel really proud of in North Carolina, in that we have an exceptionally strong mandate and a commitment to ensuring that every child receive the opportunity for an equal education. We are a state unlike any other that has this clear, explicit commitment. Some of our team, we were recently at a meeting, a gathering of 8 different states that have similar funding lawsuits and that have similar commitments, to advocating for equitable school funding. And we were hearing from all these other states, Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, Illinois, how incredible it must be in North Carolina that we have not only such a strong provision in our Constitution, but we have a literal roadmap with the Leandro Plan. We have a literal set of instructions for how we can ensure constitutional education for every child. And Naomi's going to get to that and unpack that part of the plan for us in just a bit. And Alexa mentioned, we have nothing to really crow about right now in North Carolina. We've dropped to, again, it kind of goes up and down by 1 or 2. I think she had some more recent stats, but we're always in the bottom of the bracket here, the lowest of the states for all of these different important measurements that really demonstrate that our elected leaders and our leaders at the General Assembly have made a clear decision to disinvest and to pull from potential sources of funding that would support public education and support children, and make other choices that are harming children instead. So Leandro is a long-standing lawsuit. It was brought back in the mid-90s by families organizing in our original 5 Leandro counties, low-wealth counties. We've got Hoke and Robeson in the House, and we've also got Cumberland and Halifax and Vance that are part of that core group of the original counties. And it's important to remember, we won Leandro. Leandro has already been decided. It is not in dispute that North Carolina is not ensuring a constitutional education for every child. What's at question is, what are we going to do about it? And for years, we weren't doing much at all about it. There was a lot of stalled progress throughout Democrat and Republican administrations, but it was really held up in Judge Manning's courtroom. We didn't see much progress at all, and there was a lot of kind of finger pointing and and hand wringing about, well, we don't know, how much would it cost? What would we be spending that money on? What are the types of investments that would really move the needle? So we saw a couple important developments on the horizon, and advocates started organizing, knowing that change was possible. Governor Cooper, of course, was elected and started Leandro Commission. The parties came together to say, you know what, we've been hearing that we need some guidance, right? We have a lot of questions that we don't have the answers to. So the parties agreed to commission a really historic study, an investigation of our entire school system in North Carolina. And they went with the leading group in the whole country to do this study for us, called WestEd. And that report was released towards the end of 2019, right before pandemic. And that report showed that we are actually further behind in ensuring a constitutional education, that our opportunity gaps have actually grown, that we're worse off now than when we were back in the mid-90s when this case started. So then pandemic happened, and our organizing shifted to online. But because the needs and just like the immediate challenges of doing school and showing up for our children and trying to keep everything moving forward during pandemic was so hard that the space we've created with Every Child NC really became an incredible support. And we actually grew our network of advocates. We built relationships, and we continued to organize online. And so that brings us up to 2021. And the findings and the guidance from the West Ed report were reflected in an order that Judge Lee signed in June. And that order gave us what's called the Leandro Plan, which, similar to the West Ed report, it's a comprehensive policy and funding framework that shows North Carolina what we have to do and what investments we need to make to ensure that some kids over here don't have access to high quality education, while the rest of the kids over here are still in under-resourced schools, right? The goal of Leandro is to ensure that all students are starting from the same place. And that is the criteria that were called sound basic education. Minimal standards, national standards, but it really represents the bare minimum that's required of North Carolina to ensure that every child has access to an equitable education. And Judge Lee was not messing around. He ordered in November that the state must allocate. Folks, remember back before we passed the state budget in November, we were sitting on a massive billions of dollars in unallocated dollars. We could have easily risen to the moment and committed that funding. And the $1.7 billion was really just to pay for those 2 school years, the beginning of the 8-year plan to make our system whole, right? Everything was in front of us. We knew exactly what we needed to do. The parties in the case were answering the call that for so many years we had heard. We knew what we needed to do, and we knew what the cost would be. And rather than prioritizing children and meeting our own constitutional obligation, the opponents of Leandro set out to fight it. And that's where we are right now. Judge Lee was removed and replaced by Judge Michael Robeson, which initially advocates were nervous about, because that seemed like, for the opponents who had been saying for so long that Judge Lee was really overstepping and it was an overreach, of his authority. This also seemed like a very specific decision that was made, and we didn't know what that would mean. But the good news, and what advocates trusted, was that the data doesn't lie. You can't move things around or massage the information to get out of this obligation. So Judge Robeson had one clear job: to look at the numbers from the state budget that we passed late last year, and to see what was the remaining amount that we still needed to allocate to pay for Leandro Plan. And guess what? He ruled. he agreed that we're still on the hook and that money is still owed. And so now the case is going to go up yet again to the state Supreme Court. And I think here I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Naomi to explain a little bit more about this Leandro Plan and why it matters.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Naomi Hodges. I'm one of the coalition coordinators for Every Child NC, for the coalition. So like Sarah was saying, Sarah really set us up for kind of the history of the case and what's going on now a little bit. But while we're waiting for the Supreme Court to hear the case sometime this year, right? We're ending our school year, it's almost June. And our schools are still underfunded and they're under-resourced, right? Judge Robeson said very clearly that the state had the money, but they didn't have the political will, basically. So, you know, our students, our families, our early education teachers, everyone connected to the public school systems, we continue to wait. And so what does this underfunding really mean for when we talk about rural communities? So North Carolina has the nation's second largest enrollment of rural students, right? There are a lot of people in rural North Carolina. Rural areas often have greater difficulty recruiting and retaining teachers, especially now. Inflation is so high, right? There are so many things that we can do to recruit teachers, but you need those resources in place to do that in the first place. And some districts have lost more than 20% of their teachers in a single year. And we know that that continues as we are in this moment of during the pandemic. You know, rural areas have continued to lose jobs since the 2008 Great Recession. Rural communities, you know, you have sometimes lower property values than in urban areas, which, to Alexa's point earlier, when we don't have the funding that's required from the state, it's up to districts to make up for the pieces that are lacking. And if you are a district who maybe you're small, or maybe you just don't have the tax base or the property value to fill in those holes in the same way that, you know, the district next to you does. And that can create a lot of burden on the taxation of the residents there, right? For instance, Robeson County would need to tax at almost 3 times the rate of Mecklenburg or Wake counties for the same revenue per student, right? That's not, obviously Wake County and Mecklenburg might have more students, but that's per student. And as I'm sure y'all are aware, rural districts, sometimes y'all don't have the same access to the coursework opportunities. You know, you might not have certain advanced placement courses in your school, or language immersion programs. I grew up in Durham County. I was able to go to a Spanish immersion program when I was in elementary school, and I loved it. Not everyone gets to do that. Dual credit opportunities, right? Dedicated programs for students at risk for dropping out. Those are some things that districts can provide with the right resources. Rural communities can sometimes face challenges, you know, with poverty, like Alexa was saying, when she pulled up those great data about y'all's counties, right? And so when there's also not just this barrier of access, but this barrier of economic instability, there are so many things that can go into your students or your family's educational experience. And so we've been talking about the Leandro Plan, but we haven't talked about what it actually is, like what's in it, what is it about? And so this is a general overview. There's much more information on our website if you want to deep dive into like what is the individual policy, all that kind of thing. But in general, the Leandro Plan tries to live up to these 7 tenets, elements, and these are high quality diverse supported teachers, high quality diverse supported principals, right? We know when our students have representation, when our students have teachers and administrators who have diverse experiences, they do better. Adequate and equitable funding. Like I said earlier, not every district has the same funding ability. Assessment and accountability system, right? We don't want to just throw money at the problem. We want to make sure that the money that we do throw is used correctly, and maybe it's reassessed. You know, maybe the first year, you know, you really wanted and you needed counselors and nurses or more, you know, school administration staff. And then, you know, a couple years later, maybe, okay, we have those people, they're secured, but now we need, you know, more professional development opportunities for our teachers. So you might have to shift your budget a little. And then support for low performing schools and districts. access to pre-K, so North Carolina pre-K for eligible 4-year-olds, other learning opportunities like vouchers. Early education is really expensive. The average annual cost of early education for one child is about the same as sending your child to a 4-year public university for 1 year. So it's very expensive. And you might not have a provider in your area. And then the last kind of tenet is making sure that our students, when they leave this public school system, that they are prepared for higher education or for a career opportunity, so that they're not just, put in the world and they don't know what to do. And Sarah mentioned this earlier as well, but just if you're a visual learner like me and you got to read it, the priority groups of the Leandro Plan are early childhood learners, Black, Brown, and students of color, students with disabilities. And these are an array of disabilities, not just the ones that you can see. Students from low-income households, students living in rural districts, English language learners, multilingual learners. These are the coalition's priority groups as well. And if you want more information on how the Leandro Plan impacts each of these groups, we have that information on our website. I'm going to step through the information related to rural students, but any of these, there's more information out there in the world. But what does the Leandro Plan do to address the issues that we just talked about? For low wealth districts, for rural districts, it expands funding in the first place, right? It expands the amount of money that you would get from the state. And for some districts, that is increasing overall funding by almost 50%. And this puts you on more even footing with wealthier districts who, again, have potentially a larger tax base. It supports rural students with high quality teacher preparation residency programs, right? And hopefully those preparation programs would start in the community. So you have, for myself, I have several teachers in my high school who went to my high school. And so, having that connection is so important, and having that availability of that program to prepare people in the community to come back and teach is really important. Establishing grant programs for recruitment bonuses, especially for to keep people there for multiple years. Teacher turnover rates are sometimes high with teachers leaving the field. And when you have a teacher consistently, again, the impacts are amazing. You can have, even if that student isn't in the class, having that teacher in the building, knowing that that student had a good experience in the class and come back to that student as a mentor for whatever they need is super important. Expanding community school models. And so if you don't really know what that model is, it's a little bit in the name. It's a model that really focuses the school, the physical building institution of the school, as a resource for the community, not just for students. So that means, providing the space for late night events and stuff for the community. It means having a community pantry, potentially having washer and dryers for students who maybe they can't wash their clothes at home, things like that. And providing state funding for virtual public schools. Maybe you're a child with a disability and you have to have school at home. Or maybe you just want to take an extra course. I, in high school, took an extra course online so that I could take an advanced math the next year. So they're really important for students who just want to learn more. And how does the Leandro Plan address these issues? Again, overhaul the discriminatory A through F school system, grade system, and it unfairly stigmatizes racially and economically isolated schools by placing them in this category of good or bad. And it also helps schools select culturally responsive curriculum resources and prepares teachers on how to use those resources effectively. Right? So this is, information that students want to know about and want to talk about in their classes in a way that relates to them on their outside level. I know for me, it was always hard to be like, okay, this is great information. I know it for the test, but I don't really get how that applies to me in my life. And so culturally responsive curriculum can be really important. It also provides funding to increase the number of support personnel. So this is social workers, counselors, psychologists. During the pandemic, there were lots of moments and exacerbations for students' mental health. And so having those resources available and knowing that, you're sending your student to school for 7 hours a day, you're not there, and that there could be someone there that is paying attention to them while they're there. That's like making sure that they're okay. And so those are the general things about the plan and different elements as it relates to rural districts and low-income districts. But if you're wondering about your own personal district, because of course you are, we have a tool on our website. We have two actually. The one shown here is for K through 12, but we have one as well for early education if you have a young child. But you can go and you go over here to this little district, and it's in alphabetical order. You go down and you find your district, and it will show the current funding you have, the funding that you would get under Leandro, and the percent change, the overall percent change. And so this is Anson County, and we'll see Anson County again. But overall, it's a 43% increase. And so this could mean that Anson County could pay for 43 more teachers, or 21 more teacher assistants, or 10 more counselors. And I say could because while there are specific allotments for the money, right? Like this is an allotment for children with disabilities. But districts get to decide within that allotment where the money goes. So for teachers, for instance, you might get X amount of money for teachers, for that's categorized as teachers, but maybe you want to pay your teachers more. Maybe you want to give them more benefits, something like that. And that might cost more money out of that budget. So maybe that number goes down a little bit because you're paying them a little more and you're giving them more benefits. So there's that wiggle room and the possibility. Doesn't have to be 43, it could be something. And if you scroll down a little further on that same page with the spreadsheet that I just showed you, we have printable like one-pagers that has generally that information and what it would mean for your district. So just scroll down a little bit and then you go over here and you see which district you are, and you have your own little pamphlet that you can look at, you can share. I'll go through the ones for the counties that New Rural Project serves. So again, Anson County would get 43%. And like I said, that could mean 21 more teacher assistants. It could mean 5 more community school coordinators. For early education, that's a 362% increase for Smart Start, which is the North Carolina program for early education. And that would mean 90 more infant to toddler programs like for children served for Anson County. For Hoke County, it's a 41% increase. Again, could get 60 more teacher assistants. They're so important, especially if you have large class sizes. That could mean 64 more nurses and psychologists, things like that. For Robeson County, it's a 42% increase. So that could mean 161 more slots for North Carolina Pre-K, which is the program for eligible 4-year-olds in the state. That could mean, 1,286 more money for professional development for teachers. For Union County, it's 41%. So that's 193 more teacher assistants. Whoa, no, that's wrong. I did not do that correctly. Union County, it's 29%, but that's still good. Ignore that. But that could mean 249 more slots for North Carolina Pre-K. And then for Scotland County, it's 44%, and 199 more children in the infant and toddler program. For Richmond County, it's 44%. And so that could mean 15 more community school coordinators, 57 more nurses, again, if you want to see any of these, they're on our website. And I saw that there were some people from Charlotte, and if y'all had joined us last night, I would have had a slide for Charlotte, but I took it off. But Charlotte's up there as well. Oh, I forgot Moore. I'm so sorry, Moore. So more schools would get 31%. And again, that's 261 more slots for NC pre-K. It's 140% more for textbooks, supplies, instructional materials, things like that. And so like, the Leandro Plan, it sounds great, Naomi, but like, what do I do? They're not gonna listen to me. People have the power. No, you have the power. And so things that you can do to support the plan, you can convene in your districts. If there's any, elected officials in here, there are so many things that y'all can be doing, especially at the local level. So you can introduce people to the impact tool that I just showed. You can share those one-pagers that I was talking about. You can hold meetings like this one. You don't have to have me there. We have, like I said, our website has tons of resources. You can spend a day just like going through the stuff and talking about it with other people. Telling personal stories about funding inequity in your school district, right? A lot of times, education, we like to think, it's my child or my school or my district. And yes, your individual child is important. Your experiences are your experiences. But when your experiences are also the experiences, of someone else in your school, of someone else in your district, right? That's important. It's a trend, and it should be addressed. And also, it's just good for, bringing community members together, and recognizing that there are inequities at multiple levels. And then you can also mobilize if you want to turn out for the court date. We'll be there when the date is set, and make sure to vote this year. We're in an election year. So please register, review candidates if you can. That's not just state candidates, local candidates too. They're important. Talk to your local and state elected officials about their position on Leandro, and their history with education policy, right? A lot of elected officials, some of them, know about Leandro a little bit, but they don't know too much about what's going on, or maybe, they haven't taken a formal stance on Leandro, or maybe their stance is, well, we funded it, so why are you asking? But really, you didn't fund all of it, and we should fund all of it. Other things that you can do, we have 2 action alerts right now on our website under, I believe it's under like peak action or something. It's the one on the far right. But the first one is, again, asking your lawmakers, particularly in the House Select Committee on an Education for North Carolina's Future, to fully fund Leandro. And so that committee was made a few months ago to study North Carolina's education system, even though we already have a very expensive report that studied our education system. And so we would like them to consider the Leandro Plan while they're thinking about North Carolina's education. And then the other one is to tell lawmakers to get rid of the corporate tax cuts. So along with the budget last year, there were some eliminations of the corporate income tax. And so what that means is as we go into another legislative session, the next budget cycle next year, we won't have that corporate income tax to really boost our budget. It'll be more on our everyday working class folks in North Carolina to pay for our public services. And so we want that corporate income tax elimination repealed. And you can also have your school board or county commissioner pass a local Leandro resolution. And this is saying that you support the Leandro Plan, that you will work to uphold all of the tenets of the Leandro Plan, all of the elements within your county. And then you can also work on your district priorities so that when you get that money, with whatever allotment you have, you know how you want that money spent. And I believe Ms. Christina is in Hoke County, and she worked with the Hoke NAACP to get the local Leandro resolution passed in Hoke County. So Ms. Christina, would you like to talk a little bit about your organizing out there?
Certainly, and thank you so much, Naomi. It's really a pleasure for me to be at this table on tonight's presentation. I wear several hats and certainly have appreciated the partnership that we have as a part of the coalition for Every Child in Sea. It's through that partnership that we've been able to access resources to do the organizing in the interest to develop a cadre of advocates who clearly are focused on raising the question of the Leandro Plan to high visibility and working directly to affect the signing of resolutions. In fact, in February, we were able to launch an advocacy plan with the school board, and the school board agreed to sign on a local resolution and did so. And in follow up to that, our local county board of county commissioners also signed a resolution. I mean, I think that it's really important for us to try and figure out how we encourage communities to stand up, to show up for the Leandro Plan. It really is pivotal in terms of addressing the needs of our children. And I believe that for far too long, we've been asking for this kind of waiting for this kind of support for our schools and our students. And we also understand that we must now mount stronger and bolder kinds of coalitions to make this happen. And I think that that's a strong, very targeted approach in terms of building coalitions, building local advocates who give voice to the need and who are willing to show up and stand up for the Leandro Plan.
Thank you, Ms. Christina. Exactly, it's been far too long. And Hoke and Robeson counties are two of the original counties in the case. And now I'm gonna turn it over to Suzanne Miller to talk about her work as a partner and kind of what she's doing to raise the cause of Leandro.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you this evening. I'm Suzanne Miller. I'm the Director of Pastors for North Carolina Children. And we are an organization who are mobilizing congregations and faith communities across North Carolina to support our public schools. We believe that public schools are a public good, and they are a part of our communities that are very important. And that by supporting our public schools, that we're loving our neighbors as we are called to, and to build this beloved community that we believe is important here. So we invite you tonight as a way to get involved. We have developed a voter engagement and advocacy development curriculum. It is a way for your faith community or your local civic group. You don't have to be a faith community to participate, but we have developed a program called Mission Amplify. And it is a letter writing campaign. And it's a way for groups to begin to dip their toes into advocacy in a way that is non-threatening. We are writing postcards 6 times during the year. And those postcards are being sent to your local legislators, your House and Senate reps. We're helping people find out who their reps are, to know where they stand on the issues of Leandro, and to encourage them to support various parts and pieces of the Leandro bill. So it's not only educating you about the issues more deeply, but it's also engaging with your legislators to invite them to support Leandro and support your children in your community. There's information here on the slide of if you have interest in participating. We are doing trainings each month, and those are all on Zoom, and we send you the resources that you need to be able to participate. We have packets, if you can see these, that are postcard parties in a bag that we'll send you. We also have everything online, so you can download it and participate without having to purchase stuff from us or anything like that. We want it to be available for people to use. And so we just invite you to participate. If you know of churches or faith communities or other groups who would be interested, please give them our information, share this information. We are trying to, mobilize these groups as part of the Every Child in Sea Coalition, because it really is taking all of us working together to be able to bring about the full implementation of the Leandro Plan. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzanne. And so I am going to stop sharing screen and we will open it up for kind of Q&A. And I think Ms. Christina answered this a little bit, but I'll open it up to all of our panelists, which is why is right now so urgent for us to be mobilizing around Leandro, for us to be wanting this to be fully implemented?
I guess one thing that I would add about the urgency is that in many ways for North Carolina's children, the stall on making the Leandro funds available is like a dream deferred, in the words of Lorraine Hansberry. And it's really important for our children to believe that, in fact, our state will be compelled or feel compelled to fulfill its constitutional duty to our children. And I think that that's a level of the urgency that we have to push against and encourage people to know about and to figure out how we mobilize their advocacy on behalf of making that happen. It's urgent.
Okay, Ms. Christina. Anyone else? Alexa, do you want to answer? Or Suzanne?
Well, I think there's good info going on in the chat room. Also, there's some information about the Supreme Court candidates that will be up on the ballot. And I think, as Christina mentioned earlier, it is an election year. We have people running for the General Assembly who are going to be making this budget and making the budget decisions. You have county commissioners on your ballots this year. And those county commissioners are either going to be picking up the slack for the state or not able to pick up the slack for the state. And, those folks need to kind of, take some interest in this as well. So I know that we actually do have a couple of candidates on our, joining us this evening. So I hope you guys are really listening. And at the end, we're going to give you an opportunity to take a pledge for sure, and say that this is something that you will support upon your election. We will be positive for you. And I think the same is true for our school boards. I think our local school boards need to be paying attention. Like Naomi said, if you're passing a resolution to pass on up to the General Assembly, or if you are doing some planning now and looking at how are you going to use these funds once they come down, because it is law, they should be coming down. We have a constitutional obligation to provide this sound basic education to all the students in North Carolina. And we all need to be standing up and saying that with one voice, that this is what we expect and this is what we require of you.
Thank you, Alexa. So one question that we have so far, and if you have other questions, I know some of them have been addressed in the chat, but if you have one like for discussion, feel free to ask. But one question is there a proposal being offered to uncouple property taxes from school funding? And how is the very thinly veiled racism in education funding in the General Assembly being addressed? And so to the first question of is their proposal to uncouple property taxes, there isn't one that I'm aware of, but that's a great question, and I will bring it back to our budget and tax folks to ask. Sarah, are you aware of any proposal?
Sorry, I was, I don't know if anybody else was listening in on the Spanish real quick. Oh, it might just be on my end. Naomi, I'm sorry, what was that last part?
No, you're good. I was asking, do you know of any proposal to uncouple property tax from school funding? Did you get that one?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, honestly, that would be incredible. Here, I'm listening to Spanish for some reason. Okay, it was coming up on my end. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'd say, I mean, a bill like that would be certainly incredible. I'd say, I mean, Leandro really is the vehicle that we're trying to get at that issue. Okay, the Spanish translation is over the English. Yeah, that's what I was experiencing too. Sorry, I think we're having a bit of a challenge with the interpretation when the interpreters switched, but you know, Leandro really is the vehicle that we have for a legislative solution to entrenched funding inequities that are caused because we still rely on that local property tax. That's why, you know, school communities in Orange County can commit to over $5,000 for local funding per pupil. And I think Alexa had more updated information than I do, but you know, down the road in Hoke, we're around 900, right? In Robeson, we're around 430. It's not that the families in those counties value public education any less than families in Orange County. It's just because, you know, that is still this antiquated model that we use to fund public education through local property tax. So I'd say, you know, certainly I envision, you know, a time when we could introduce that type of legislation. I'd say for now, our best hope is, and the right vehicle for that type of legislative solution is in Leandro. So to try and answer that, I think we'll get to that more transformative change, you know, if we get Leandro right right now.
Thanks, and Alexa, did you want to add something?
No, I did want to, I guess, share another couple of questions that have been passed in. So I guess one of the questions that has been asked is, so we have folks that have joined in tonight that are retired public defenders, attorneys, and they're asking how they can help as a volunteer.
Okay, I will get to that in just a second. I do want to finish up with the other question, which was about the very thinly veiled racism in education funding. So, you know, it's a large question that's systemic. It's not something that Leandro itself is going to fix. I think the implementation of the full Leandro plan is a good start. I think also, you know, we're in this moment of redistricting, right? The districts, I believe, have been solidified now, but you know, before they were very racially biased. And so this election, again, is super important because now we have newly redrawn districts that meet the court standards, whatever that may be. So maybe there'll be a little bit more pushback. We do have some legislative allies in the General Assembly. It's not all doom and gloom, but we need more of them. And so to the volunteer question, you're all more than welcome to join Every Child in C. You know, we love having more people. You can come to our events. You can volunteer to, you know, help share our stuff. It doesn't have to be super hard. And then also, you know, if you have time and if you're near Raleigh at any time, if you want to show up at your legislator's office, do it. They're in short session right now. They're in the building. And a lot of times during the pandemic, they were a little bit more transparent about their meetings, but I've seen a lot more where it says WebEx will not be provided because they're in person. So if you have time, if you're someone who's retired, or maybe, you know, you're not really, you don't have like daytime responsibilities and you want to go over and see what they're up to. Same thing with your local, you know, your local school boards. There's so much happening at your local school boards and your town hall meetings. That's where I would start. But yeah, any other volunteer opportunities? Anyone else want to lift up? No? Okay.
think a lot of counties have been forming grassroots advocacy groups. Some of them are now part of Every Child NC. And so I think, definitely look for those in your area if you're looking to do that. And that's part of what New Rural Project is hoping to accomplish with this meeting and this webinar tonight. We're hoping that with the introduction of this information, it'll start more conversations, and we can come in to your communities. We'd love to start coming into the counties and working on some of these postcarding opportunities, helping form public comments that you can make at your local county commissioners or boards of education meetings, where you can request these resolutions to be passed. We can take the baton from the Hoke County NAACP, who has managed to do this, and one of the founding state counties for the Leandro Plan and the Leandro case, and just say, okay, it's time. We need to get this done now. And that's another question that came up a lot during the registration period, is how, this was passed, this was law. How is this allowed to continue to not be funded? And I don't know that I have an answer to that. Does anybody else?
I think the fact is that there just hasn't been the massive voice and interest exerted. And I think that to the extent we are willing to build bases of advocates in every community, for those volunteers who have time, I mean, the coalition has a comprehensive guide around advocacy, a toolkit on its website that's easily accessible for anyone who's interested in building advocates. That's what we need. We need to make sure that we are walking one step, one beat on this, because it is time for it to happen. And that's the slogan we really want to encourage. Show up, stand up for the Leandro Plan. It's standing up for our children. It's time.
Yes, Ms. Christina. We haven't had the political will. We have the money, we have the court order, we have a plan. We don't have the political will. And the past budget, the court had found from Judge Robeson's order last month. The first year was funded about, I might have gotten these backwards. The first year was funded 50%, and the second year was 60%. That might be flipped. But so that's still 40 and 50% of money that districts aren't getting, that they were supposed to get. And what that does is, this isn't a one and done plan. It's an 8-year plan, okay? So when you're already starting off behind in this implementation, you have to play catch up along the way. And so, it's not really doing what it's supposed to do if you only do half of it. So yeah, it's not, again, it's not being done because they don't want it to be done, is the answer. We have all the things. Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that's really, that we haven't named tonight that's important is just this push for privatization that's happening all over the country. But really, North Carolina is some of the test grounds for ways that some folks in our country are really trying to privatize education. There's a large push for privatization of all different types of public goods. But schools especially, we see that through the Opportunity Scholarship or the voucher programs. We see that through the push of charter schools and the private boards that manage those, a lot of times that are taking the money and not necessarily using it in ways that benefit the children. The ways that those both are helping to resegregate our schools and take away the diversity that we know is beneficial to all children. And so these are things that are affecting this case as well, because it's happening at the local levels, but it's also happening in benefit, being supported at the state level. And so that's some of the conflict, is this, push to privatization. And that's not a partisan statement. That's coming from both sides. That's something that's happening in both major parties and has been for decades at this point. And that's just really taking away this public good that supports over 80% of the children in our state. And we're talking about 1.5 million children who, are in our public schools. So it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue in all 7 of the counties that we're talking about specifically tonight, but it's happening in every county in our state. And so it's just something to start paying attention to and being aware of, because that is the other side of the coin. The folks who are against Leandro are pro-privatization, and that's why they don't want to. And some of that does come down to race. A significant portion of it comes down to race, and it's something that we continue to have to name and to work against, because it's not right. Our children, all of our children, deserve the best education that we can provide, and we can do better.
I love having Suzanne on, thanks, because she's so right. Yeah. Are there any other questions for us? I know that there were some in the chat that I believe were answered about how the different streams of funding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, we were talking in the chat a little bit about, there was a question about the ways that the funding is covered.
Mhm.
And I just want to put this on the record of the video. Funding comes in 3 ways in schools, and 12% of that comes approximately from the federal government. That covers your career and technical education classes. That covers your IDEA, your Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It covers free and reduced lunch, which comes out of actually the Department of Agriculture and the Farm Bill. So those types of things are funded at the federal level, and federally, they've never fully funded the IDEA at the levels that they're supposed to. So that is a way to push on your US representatives to fully fund IDEA. Secondly, we have 26% of our funding, which comes from our local governments. That's your county commissioners, because in North Carolina, school districts do not have the taxing authority. So the school districts present their budget and the county commissioners approve it and levy the taxes for that. So that is why those folks are really important in this discussion. Then 62% comes from the state. And local funding is to cover infrastructure. It nowadays covers a lot more than infrastructure, because counties are trying to make up the gaps for teacher supplements and other resources and things like that the state is not covering. But those are the state is supposed to cover those resources. The counties are supposed to cover infrastructure, buildings and buses and those types of things. So when we look at the state funding, those are the teacher salaries, those are the resources, the books, the technology, anything that it takes to educate our children. Someone mentioned the lottery. The lottery does not benefit education. That's an absolute misnomer. What happened is, when they did the last vote on the lottery before it was fully enacted, they took out the requirement for the lottery to be additional funding. Therefore, the lottery is only shifting money from bucket to bucket and not actually increasing the total amount of money into our schools. So realize that that is a way that we are trying to fund schools, but it is actually only a drop in the bucket, and it truly is not additional funding. So don't be fooled by those ads on television. Thanks.
I wanted to add also that, when we're looking at these state funds and the federal funds and the county funds, and Suzanne just made a great point, is, the state is supposed to fund the teacher salaries. But then they might pass, like they've just recently passed, a salary increase, which was much needed, much deserved. Nobody's saying it wasn't, for classified staff. That would be like bus drivers and teacher assistants, but they haven't given any more money in the budget to pay for that. So who is that coming from? And that ends up falling on the district, on the county. And so if you're in a county, who's given you lots of money, or who's very open to giving money, or who has the money to give, you might be able to do that. But sometimes the districts don't have that money to be able to even meet these. So these are a lot of the unfunded mandates that get passed down from the state level, where the county is supposed to pick up the slack, and they're just not able to do that. That's partly why this is what it is about, being equitable. In these tier 3 counties, I'll just make a quick mention. I live in Moore County, so I'm able to talk about this. Moore County is considered a tier 3, very economically stable. We have some very high priced homes in a couple of very nice towns and neighborhoods, but we also have very poor pockets of Moore County that are hurt by our tier 3 standing. So it's very important. It's not just that we're equitable from county to county, it's also within the counties. Our schools in our northern end of the county aren't getting the same resources as our lower end, the southern end of our county. And when Moore County redistricted school lines not too long ago, that was one of the big pieces of concern that the community raised was, my child has been going to school X and has had orchestra as an opportunity and band. Now you want to send them to school Y where they just don't even have that. So it's equitable across the board through all of the students in North Carolina.
Thank you for sharing that, Alexa. Are there any other lingering questions or comments for us while you have us here? If you're typing them in the chat, that's cool. I'm just gonna put up our last little slide, which has like all of the contact. Oh, Alexa, do you mind stopping your share real quick? It's okay. It's okay. There you go. And yes, we do speak to groups, upon request. But if you would like to reach out to us about that, here is Every Child in Seas information, New Rural Project, pastors, if you're interested in doing any of that letter writing, postcard writing, or if you want to put them in touch with someone in your faith community, great resource. But here's all of our information. Again, it's also on our website, which you can see anytime, not just right now. And this recording will be on our Facebook page, as well as, I'm sure, New Rural Projects and our YouTube. So if you're like, I don't remember what they said, you can go back, you can watch it, have fun, share it with people. But yeah.
I'll also send out a follow-up email to those who registered through our Mobilize link that will contain some of the information sheets, maybe some of these slides. I guess we'll put that together and get that out to you folks. And then feel free to share the word, spread the word, and be on the lookout for follow-up emails from me also about setting up in-person county-wide meetings where we'll be happy to come and meet with your county commissioners, your boards of education, or just with parents and families and trying to get the word out.
Thank you all for coming. I mean, we can hang out a little bit, or we can say good night.
Like we're looking for more questions to pop up in either the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't see too many or any.
Yeah. I feel like, so, whenever I sign up for an evening Zoom, it's always a real treat when they end a few minutes early. So
Yeah.
Maybe we're just giving people a free 15 minutes tonight.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Bye.